And the National District Attorney charged RaDonda with reckless homicide and abuse of an impaired adult in 2019.
I can't
Those
fathom.
words.
Reckless homicide and abuse. That's heavy.
They should have charged the hospital with homicide is what they should have done. Those goddamn corporate who sit in their offices pushing papers in an air-conditioned room, they're not on the floor. They don't know what that is. They have no clue. Zero. None. Zero. This is going to be a disorganized segment, mostly because I don't have a whole lot of stats and factual information in front of me, which usually I do. I like to supplement what I do with stats and factual information, but I don't feel like it's as impactful as a personal experience, right? So I could pull up all the data, all the statistics that I want, but I want to do this purely from the heart. It's going to be two parts. One, I want to talk about myself and my experiences as a nurse. And the other part is I want to relate it to an experience of another nurse who was just convicted of homicide. So, as a nurse, I became a nurse in 2020. Great year to become a nurse. All the hospitals were furloughing. So, as an RN, people ask me sometimes, why didn't you work in a hospital? Well, the hospitals were furloughing in Ohio. So, ironically, they were not hiring. So, I had to go to a nursing home. And in the nursing home, I learned some very harsh lessons about the reality of the medical field. It was eye-opening. It was disgusting sometimes. I look back, honestly, and it's insane. It's insane. Just to give you an idea, right? Brand new nurse, fresh out of school. So I got my license in May of that year, and in August, I was on the floor, right? I trained at that facility for 6 days. 6 days, brand new. And they were like, that's enough. You're good. You're on your own. I made a lot of mistakes, okay? And I'm not proud to admit that, but I did. I made a lot of mistakes. And then what's even less proud to admit is that many of those mistakes were covered up. They were never reported on. Nobody ever found out. They were mostly tiny errors, right? But they were errors nonetheless. And a lot of those errors were due to my fresh baby face in the nursing world, right? But many of those errors were avoidable. If I had simply had the time and the resources to learn properly what to do and to actually have the time to pass people their meds appropriately, then I wouldn't have screwed up so many med passes and gotten drugs wrong. Again, thankfully those drugs were not killing anybody, but I did mix up meds a lot, okay? We cut many corners that I'm not proud of cutting. I even witnessed literal elder abuse. Literal elder abuse. I witnessed it and never reported it. Why did I not report it? Because I was fresh out of nursing school and I didn't want to push any buttons, okay? I had a job. I didn't want to get fired. These people had been in the workplace for 10, 20, 30, even plus years ahead of me, okay? So I was in a tough situation and I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I worked there for 6 months. Finally, I decide this is enough. I'm done. And then I went to another nursing home, of course. But before I left, the reason I switched nursing homes because they were paying better, quite frankly. And before I left, the management, the micro management, I should say, decided they were going to guilt trip me and say, well, hold on now. You don't want to abandon your patients now, do you? They need you, Alec. They need you here. And it was really gross manipulation. It was disgusting. Looking back, I can say that, right? But at the time, I literally felt bad. I legitimately felt bad that they were saying that because I thought in my head, I was like, they're right. I've known these guys for 6 months. I've worked with them. Yeah, you wouldn't let this sweet old lady die, right? Well, now hold on now. Also, just as a side note, I caught COVID there. I worked at the COVID unit and caught COVID there. Kept working the same day that they tested me for COVID because I was on the COVID unit and I was technically allowed. Nearly passed out in the middle of the day and then I went home. All beside the point. There's more to the story, but I digress. So, let's keep going. I got my next job. Month goes by. I decide I'm going to go work agency. And if you don't know what working agency is, basically that just means instead of working directly for a nursing home, I'm going to work for an agency that contracts people out to nursing homes. So I become a contractor, right? I make way more money that way. I'm still on my parents' insurance, so I don't need insurance coverage, which is awesome. And, it works out for me and people who need nursing staff get the benefit of having me there, right? So I do that, but before I do, I got guilted again. I won't go too far into it, but suffice it to say, I was not happy about it. They literally put me on a do not return list because they were bitter. By the way, I do want to point out that I am in much better circumstances now. I got a brief stint at a rehab facility, a drug rehab facility. I did good work there. I'm proud of the work that I did there, and I don't feel like the conditions were quite as bad as the nursing homes. I could go into a whole other tirade about the issues with drug rehabilitation and my issues with that, but I would be going so off the path that I'm just not going to get into it. There are, of course, still issues in home care, which is what I'm doing. But the reason I'm bringing all this up is because I want to give you guys an idea of the types of things that we deal with in the nursing home, right? Or in nursing in general. Because, okay, Winry's just going to hang out there while I'm having a moment. I made many med errors, right? In fact, just last week, I was training a nurse. She had like 10 years of experience on me. And when I say training, I meant I was training her for the case I was doing. And she made a med error that I did not make, okay? She gave the client too much iron, right? Honest mistake. There was a whole mess with it. The family was very understanding, but it was a med error nonetheless. You can do this at any point in your career as a nurse or as a healthcare professional. It can just happen. And the more disorganized it is and the fewer staff that you have, the more likely it is to happen. Unfortunately, in the United States, staffing shortages are an enormous problem in so many areas of healthcare. On top of just being overloaded with work, like admissions. Admissions take so long. If you don't know, admissions are insane. They make you call the hospitals to like get more information. Sometimes you even have to be the one to set up transportation to hospitals and to appointments if like they don't have staff there to do it. Most of these nursing homes don't even have regular DONs. DON is director of nursing, and they're the ones who are supposed to be running the show, right? They are the manager. And they don't have them because being a DON basically means contracting your entire being to that nursing home. You are on call 24/7. Nobody wants to do that, including me. Don't catch me doing that. People have asked me, not going to do it. Fuck that. I don't care how much you're paying me. You are not going to own my ass. Anyway, why am I bringing all this up? Because it recently came to my attention. This is an old story. It's from last year, but I didn't know about it until recently. So I wanted to talk about it because this is near and dear to my heart, okay? Tennessee nurse convicted in lethal drug error sentenced to 3 years probation. This nurse right here made a drug error, much like I have, much like probably most nurses have, if I had to guess, right? And unfortunately, this resulted in the death of her patient. It can happen to the best of us, as I just stated. Nurse had 10 years experience on me, and it happened to her. Let's read a little bit about it. I want to go to the Wikipedia page first, and then we'll read the news article. RaDonda Vaught homicide case. Now, this is so crucial. This is so influential to the way that people view nursing that it has its own Wikipedia page. So take that in for a second. The RaDonda Vaught homicide case was an American legal trial in which former Vanderbilt University Medical Center nurse RaDonda Vaught was convicted of criminally negligent homicide and impaired adult abuse after she mistakenly administered the wrong medication that killed a patient in 2017. She was sentenced to 3 years probation. The case has been highly controversial. Vaught's trial, which was held in Nashville, Tennessee in March 2022, garnered national attention and sparked a debate over when it should be appropriate to prosecute healthcare professionals for medical errors that result in harm to patients. Nurses and other medical practitioners closely monitored the trial. Not me, because, I don't pay attention to anything. Thank you, ADHD. And many expressed concern, alarm, and outrage following the verdict. Some experts and professional organizations warned that the case was likely to negatively affect the quality of American healthcare by discouraging healthcare workers from reporting their mistakes. Similarly, the case was seen as undermining the practice of just culture, a policy that has been widely adopted by the medical field over the past 2 decades in order to improve patient safety. Just culture views genuine errors as system failures and does not penalize the workers who report making them. Concerns have also been raised that Vaught's prosecution would cause some nurses to leave the field and some prospective nurses not to enter it in the first place at a time when there is already a nursing shortage. So yes, there is a nursing shortage right now in America, and they decided, you know what, we're going to go ahead and drop all the blame on this nurse. On December 24, 2017, 75-year-old Charlene Murphy was admitted to the hospital for a subdural hematoma. 2 days later, Vaught, a registered nurse, was instructed to administer Versed to Murphy, but instead administered vecuronium, a paralyzing drug. Vaught had tried to withdraw Versed from an automated dispensing cabinet, and when that did not work, she used an override, which allowed her to access a larger array of medications. Murphy was to be given Versed prior to an MRI scan, a procedure requiring patients to remain very still for 15 minutes or longer. After receiving the vecuronium, Murphy went into cardiac arrest but was resuscitated. However, she had sustained permanent brain damage and was determined to be brain dead. Murphy died the next day after being taken off life support. Vaught immediately admitted the error and was fired from the hospital after an internal investigation in January 2018. She was arrested and charged in Murphy's death in 2019. As a nurse, I don't know if I can properly communicate to you guys how heart-wrenching this is. Not even heart-wrenching, just like the sheer amount of nervous pressure that I get just reading this and imagining that could have been me. That could have been me because I've made mistakes. I've made med errors. I just recently had a fall that was not supposed to happen. Okay? By all means, it was not supposed to happen. Now, we could talk about the changing table, etc., and how it was too small, but it shouldn't have happened. I made a mistake and it should not have happened. Okay? The kid's fine. He got a little bump on his head. No biggie. You know what? Let's dig into that a little bit. Let's say that kid that had fallen off the changing table, and just to be clear, I took a few steps away from the changing table where nobody else was around. Changing table was too small. There was a blanket underneath that slid. There were a lot of factors that led to this, but I was one of them. I made a mistake, okay? And I wasn't stepping away for a fucking sip of energy drink. I was stepping away to fix his wheelchair so we could get him in it. But let's say that kid had broken his neck and died, okay? Horrible thought. Horrible, horrible, horrible thought. Do you think that warrants me not only losing my license, but having a criminal conviction of homicide on my record forever? I think not. No way. That's insane. That's insane. Okay. Literally insane. Like, think about it. If that kid had fallen like 1 inch to the left, he could be dead. I could be in court right now. Think about that. That's insane. And it's no wonder that people were watching this case, like healthcare professionals were watching this case, because they wanted to know, like, what's my future in healthcare, you know? And what is the future of healthcare in general? Like, how many people do you think are going to go into healthcare after seeing this? I don't think that the news article has anything that we haven't already read over, but we'll go over it anyway real quick. RaDonda Vaught, a former Tennessee nurse convicted of 2 felonies for a fatal drug error, whose trial became a rallying cry for nurses fearful of the criminalization of medical mistakes, will not be required to spend any time in prison. I feel like that's a weird way of framing this, because even though she's not going to be in prison, she's still put on 3 years of probation and no longer has a nurse's license. And she has a felony on her record. She'll be working a gas station, basically. Like, it's tragic. Tragic. Davidson County Criminal Court Judge Jennifer Smith on Friday granted Vaught a judicial diversion, which means her conviction will be expunged if she completes a 3-year probation. Okay. So her conviction will be expunged. So once she's done with 3 years, the conviction's off her record. I misspoke. I apologize. Still, the conviction itself was not just. Smith said that the Murphy family suffered a terrible loss and nothing that happens here today can ease that loss. Ms. Vaught is well aware of the seriousness of the offense, Smith said. She credibly expressed remorse in this courtroom. Not only did she express remorse in the courtroom, she immediately after the incident reported it all, admitted it all. She did everything by the book. She did it entirely correctly, exactly the way that I would have done it. By the book, okay? It blows my mind that this got to this point. Okay. As the sentence was read, cheers erupted from a crowd of hundreds of purple-clad protesters who gathered outside the courthouse. Vaught, 38, a former nurse at Vanderbilt University, faced up to 8 years in prison. In March, she was convicted of criminally negligent homicide and gross neglect of an impaired adult for the 2017 death of 75-year-old patient Charlene Murphy. Murphy was prescribed for a sedative, but Vaught inadvertently gave her a fatal dose of vecuronium, a powerful paralyzer. Charlene Murphy's son, Michael Murphy, testified at Friday's sentencing hearing that his family remains devastated by the sudden death of their matriarch. She was, quote, a very forgiving person who would not want Vaught to serve any prison time, he said, but his widower father wanted Vaught to receive the maximum sentence. I'm not going to comment on that. I can't, because I like if something happened to Katie, then I would not be a reasonable human being either. So I'm not going to comment on that. My dad suffers every day from this, Michael Murphy said. He goes out to the graveyard 3 to 4 times a week and just sits out there and cries. It's all around just fucking horrible. But this shit happens. Okay? And we're going to talk about why it happens. But first, I want you guys to hear from the lady herself. Okay? Let's hear it from the horse's mouth, shall we?
Good morning, Lucy. Good morning.
There's a sense of peace here, a sense of home, a sense that God's country is not just a Southern expression, but something much more.
Every day is a gift. Every day that I get up to and free in my home is a gift.
Here in her serene corner of rural Tennessee, RaDonda Vaught lives her small slice of the simple life, an almost unimaginable reality from the maelstrom that the 38-year-old former nurse has lived through.
Do you feel like you were a scapegoat?
I think the whole world feels like I was a scapegoat. There's a fine line between blame and responsibility. Nothing is done in a vacuum.
The trial begins for a former nurse at Vanderbilt Medical Center accused of administering a fatal dose of the wrong medication.
For the past 5 years, RaDonda Vaught has faced the fight of her life. A former intensive care unit nurse who in 2017 accidentally gave the wrong drug to a patient, Charlene Murphy.
In case you don't know, like, about the ICU, I've been in an ICU as a student, and that place is a shit show, okay? It's a shit show. You cannot convince me that in Tennessee, of all places, that it would be any better than in Ohio, okay? No shot.
Causing her to lose her life. A tragic mistake, but what followed was a whirlwind that surprised many. Criminal charges and a conviction for an accident.
We, the jury, find the defendant, RaDonda Vaught, guilty of criminally negligent homicide.
Insane.
Tonight, the nurse at the center of it all.
Have you played this over and over and over in your head?
Every day. So many times.
I can't even fucking fathom, dude. I still replay incidents where I gave like the wrong fucking vitamin to somebody. Jesus Christ.
Over and over and over.
And
we went from healthcare
that's gotta
heroes
be
to
torment.
sacrificial lambs.
the nationwide fight for change from the frontline workers, fearing they could be next.
Almost every nurse has had a medication error of some sort. That could be any one of us.
Yep. And you know what? I'm so glad, by the way, that the nursing community came together like this and said, this is not okay. We stand with her. Like, we all fuck up. And we fuck up primarily because our system sucks. Okay? That's why.
Yeah, you have this purpose to take care of them. And you just want to do the very best you can.
It can take a lifetime for someone to find their purpose. By 2017, RaDonda Vaught knew that she had found hers in the neurological intensive care unit at Vanderbilt Medical Center in Nashville.
For me, it was kind of like, I didn't like any of the biology jobs. So my mom was like, why don't you be a nurse? And I was like, okay.
It's Christmas time, 2017. Elderly woman named Charlene Murphy is admitted into the hospital for a brain injury. She's treated, soon ready to be released, but needs a final scan before she can be sent home, which requires her to have a sedative because she was nervous about the scan. You're the nurse that's now called in to help. When did you realize something went wrong?
It wasn't until she had been brought back to our unit as an intensive care patient, and a code had been called in the PET scan area where she was.
RaDonda was supposed to give Charlene a sedative, Versed. Instead, she accidentally administered a powerful paralyzing drug, Vecuronium, a catastrophic mistake which caused Charlene severe brain damage.
Her primary nurse had approached me and showed me the vial of medication and asked, is this what you give her? And it wasn't until that time that I realized that.
How common are incidents like this, like the kinds that literally kill people? That's a two-part question. The incidents that kill people are few and far between. They do happen, and I don't want to undersell it. They happen more often than they should because the system's so fucked, and we're going to talk about that. But they generally are not that common. I've had a couple of people die on me, but I did work in an elderly home. So, like, it was kind of unavoidable. Like, one of them fell and then had to be transported to the hospital and died there. And then another person I was working agency and they happened to die on my unit. None of that was a mistake. It just kind of happened. As far as like med errors, killing people, it does happen. Like, I don't want to undersell it, but it's not very common. I would have to look at the statistics, but I don't think it's that common. The other part of the question is med errors themselves. Those happen all the time, okay? Like, literally all the time. You'd be hard pressed to find a nurse who's been in the field for at least a few years and was like, oh, I've never had a med error. I've never messed up a single. Yeah, fuck you. Yeah, you have. Okay. Like, that shit happens constantly.
it was the wrong medication that I had given her.
At 75, Charlene would die from that fatal dose.
When you saw the vial and you read what was on the vial, I mean, what goes through your head?
Your heart goes.
Well, that's terrifying. Like I said, med errors happen all the time. Usually they're pretty, like, underwhelming. The med error I was talking about with the client that I just had, the nurse who had 10 years on me, right? She was the one who made the med error, and she gave somebody like 3 times the amount of iron they were supposed to have, right? Could it technically hurt him? Of course. Like, there's always that risk. And he did have, like, we noticed there was like some pink in his urine, so there might have been like some excess blood that exited his urine, and he was backed up a little bit from like he got a little constipated. Usually it's like stuff like that. Like, you feel a little more dizzy than usual. You're a little more constipated than usual. It's pretty underwhelming. The people usually are fine. 99 times out of 100, they turn out totally fine.
Just through the floor.
Yeah. No. My heart goes to the floor just thinking about it.
You just, you can't even imagine.
Vanderbilt fired RaDonda, but what came next shook her to her core. After multiple investigations, her nursing license revoked, and the National District Attorney charged RaDonda with reckless homicide and abuse of an impaired adult in 2019.
I can't
Those
fathom.
words.
Reckless homicide and abuse. That's heavy.
They should have charged the fucking hospital with homicide is what they should have done. Those goddamn corporate assholes who sit in their fucking offices pushing papers in an air-conditioned room, they're not on the fucking floor. They don't know what that shit is. They have no clue. Zero. None. Zero. You fucking assholes.
Prosecution basing its case on what they
threw her
say
under the
were
fucking
18
bus.
egregious actions and inactions that killed Charlene Murphy. Among them, they argue, was overriding the system used to obtain drugs and ignoring a warning directly on the vial cap.
We had to use the override function to obtain medications.
This was like a normal part of your routine,
Yes.
having to hit override.
Yeah, that's real. That's real. Using the override function is like a constant. Like, I don't work hospitals, but I've seen it. Okay, I was a student in the hospitals. They use the override function all the fucking time. All the time. And nobody says jack shit about it. And they're trying to sit here telling her that that was her mistake. Now, fuck off. You taught
couldn't
us that
obtain
shit.
IV fluid without hitting the override button.
Vaught admitted she was distracted that day because she was escorting a trainee.
Anytime you have an additional
Well,
responsibility,
I didn't even know that part.
that responsibility can be distracting. I allowed myself to split my focus.
But Vaught's attorneys argued that her fatal mistake was made possible by systemic errors involving the hospital's pharmacy, which
1000%.
allowed nurses to routinely override safeguards. A 56-page federal investigative report following Murphy's death also outlined deficiencies.
Crucial miswording. Not allowed nurses.
Routinely override safeguards.
Not allowed nurses to routinely override safeguards. Required them. Required them. Very important wording. It required them to do it.
A 56-page federal investigative report following Murphy's death also outlined deficiencies found at the hospital.
So many things had to line up incorrectly for this error to have happened. And my actions were not alone in that.
We're not talking about an intentional
And it's good she
act. We're not talking about
recognizes
a nurse
that.
trying to kill a
And
patient.
she's right to say it.
A medical error to lead to a criminal charge, and in particular, a charge of homicide. That's very, very rare. I can't think of another recent instance where it has occurred.
Well, it's
Neither
fucking
the medical
Tennessee,
center
baby.
nor anyone else associated with it face criminal consequences.
How is she not crying? Oh, she was tearing up earlier in the interview. It's also been like, what? At this, like, at the time they uploaded this video, I think it's been like 4 or 5 years since the incident. I'm not saying that makes it any less hard, but it, you know, you've been living with this for a while.
For the incident.
Exactly.
ABC
exactly.
News reached out to Vanderbilt Medical Center, but they declined to comment. Following a federal investigation, the hospital submitted a corrective plan of action to address some of the findings included in the report.
Including throwing your fucking employee under the bus. Corrective plan my ass. My fucking ass.
Responsible in what happened here.
I mean, nobody wants to point a finger. That's not what you're supposed to do in healthcare. You don't point your finger and blame someone.
Yep.
You hold yourself accountable as a part of a team and you say, what could I have done better? What could we have done better? I'm responsible for what I failed to do.
This was such a freak thing. My brother told me something a few weeks ago after I dropped that. I didn't drop a patient, after the patient fell, right? He said, Alec, and he's a nurse too, just so you know. He said, Alec, 90% of the people who were in your position at that time would have done the exact same thing. And he was right. There were circumstances there that were outside of my control, and there were a couple that were within my control. But I did the right thing after it happened. I called the parents immediately. I fessed up to what I did wrong, and I said, this is what, and I also acknowledged changing tables too small. There's no side rails. The kid has seizures. He can't roll, but he moves around a little bit, right? He gets uncomfortable and he bites himself and whatever. And I tried to reposition him and the blanket under him was slipping. There were so many factors to this fall and so many things that lined up that made that fall possible. If we had changed one thing, maybe it could have been avoided, right? And I truly believe, if I had been in her position, I probably would have made the same mistake. I think 90% of the nurses who were in her position would have and could have made exactly the same mistake. She was just the unfortunate son of a bitch that it happened to.
This year, the jury returned a guilty verdict on the lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide and on the abuse charge.
And who gathered this jury, by the way? No.
RaDonda faced up to 8 years in prison.
Let's not forget that RaDonda's freedom is at stake.
It really is the straw that broke the camel's back. After everything
this is
nurses
solidarity.
Have been through the last 2+ years, now
this
to
is solidarity.
Be charged criminally and convicted. Why would anybody want to be a nurse now?
A firestorm spread across the country. A Change.org petition calling for clemency for Vaught garnered more than 200,000 signatures. The American Nursing Association saying it was deeply distressed by this verdict and the harmful ramifications of criminalizing the honest reporting of mistakes, and that the case set a dangerous precedent. All this a spark in an already vulnerable healthcare system.
This right here is the silver lining. Look at this. Look at this crowd. This right here is the silver lining to all of it, because all of them know. If nurses have been taught nothing else, we know that at the end of the day, but despite all our disagreements, despite all of it, we have got to stick with each other and we've got to stand up for each other, because if we don't, we're going to be next on the chopping block.
On the brink of collapse.
We'll spend an entire 12-hour shift not going to the bathroom.
Healthcare workers need qualified immunity. Unironically agreed.
Not eating, not drinking enough water. You get to the end of the day and you're just mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted.
Oh yeah, no, I've gone entire 12-hour shifts without eating a single bite of food or drinking a single ounce of water.
The system is set up to make it easy for us to make a mistake like this.
Nurses Tina and Erica came together to form a support group for RaDonda.
I'm so proud of you.
It is, isn't it?
This is a public safety issue. I don't want to live in a world where if I go to a hospital, the nurses and doctors that are going to be taking care of me would be afraid to speak up if they made a mistake.
While Vaught's performance fell below what the profession kind of aims for, to say that if you were to make an error like this, you would face a homicide charge and possibly years in prison,
insane,
would cause a lot of those people to reconsider whether to stay a nurse or whether to become a nurse.
All rise.
At her center.
Why is there a nursing shortage? I don't know. There's a nursing shortage. That's crazy.
This month, RaDonda making a heartfelt apology.
I would like to apologize to this Murphy's family, first of all.
She will never be lost in my mind. She will always remind me every day of what I need to do to be better as a person.
Murphy's family grieving and expressing their lost relatives' wishes.
We forgive her. My mother-in-law would want her to be forgiven. And jail time is not an option to me for her.
Good woman.
Court therefore finds
that takes a lot.
Judicial diversion is appropriate.
RaDonda.
By the way, I want to reiterate, I do not blame the husband for his reaction. I want to make that perfectly clear. That is such a devastating loss And I don't want his, I disagree with his sentiment, but I can't put myself in his position. I literally can't. So the fact that the rest of his family is that strong to be able to do that says a lot.
Was sentenced to 3 years supervised probation. ABC News reached out to the family of Charlene Murphy, and they declined an interview at this time.
I will always carry her with me, and if I can affect a positive change, I'm going to do that. It is heart-wrenching to know that Miss Murphy and her family were so horrifically let down.
His grief is beyond understandable, but I don't respect his desire to punish her this hard. Listen, I don't agree with what he's saying. I'm telling you guys that directing any kind of ire toward him is not the move. You can say objectively that yes, he's incorrect that this woman should be prosecuted to the fullest extent and get 8 fucking years in prison. That's ridiculous. Everyone knows that. What I'm saying is that's the incorrect point to focus on. Obviously, he's fucking heartbroken. He's not a rational human being. He's just not. Okay? And I wouldn't be either. I'm not mentally strong enough for that. I'm not. So I can't judge the guy. So all I'm saying is don't judge him.
Are the patient and the family that will live with me the most.
Well, that was depressing. Okay. I guess the reason I'm talking about this is because, you know, I'm an RN. I'm a nurse. And I could pull up all the statistics in the world. I could pull up all the data in the world to show you guys how awful, how barbaric this country is to its nurses. And then how that ends up, I mean, somebody died, right? So that ends up, who gets the ass of that? Who gets the worst part of that? It's the patients, it's the clients, the patients, whatever you call them, right? In nursing homes, it's the residents. You know, they all are the ones who get the ass end of that. And I will be doing a segment soon, by the way, on how conservatives do not give a shit about respecting your elders. Loosely related, but part of it is the nursing homes. For right now, what I want to instill in you guys is that watching, I had not watched this before, but watching this video, like I'm so close to tears watching this because I can't help putting myself in her position because I've made med errors. I've made really dumb mistakes. I've been a nurse for 2.5 years, and I feel like sometimes I feel like I've seen the amounts that most people would see not even in 20 years of their life. There's some really dark, fucked up shit that goes on behind these closed doors in these hospitals, in these nursing homes, even in home care. You know, home care is better, but it's got its issues, you know? It just sucks. And so people are wondering why there's a nursing shortage. Well, this is why. Well, this is one aspect of why. Because you're put under so much pressure, under so much stress, given so much responsibility, literally have people's lives in the palm of your hand. You know, I don't know if I can express to you guys the raw emotion of feeling like you fucked that up, feeling like you did everything that you can, and it wasn't enough. You know? And I can't, I can't, I can't even imagine. It's so fucked up. It's so fucked up. We don't deserve this. But more importantly, these patients don't deserve this. These families don't deserve this. I was just talking to the person who's training me today and yesterday for trach and vent care, which, by the way, trach and vent care is its own beast. That's very scary shit. But I was just talking to her, and she strikes me as somebody with conservative leanings, right? You know, she talks about these bills that go through Congress that have a bunch of pork in them, right? She even brought up parents' rights at one point. I digress. She's a good person, but she had some interesting views. She's a normie, okay? And the funny thing is, even as somebody who had conservative views, we agreed on something. We said healthcare needs to be free. It needs to be not incentivized by profit. And I think that people across the board agree with that. Because when healthcare is incentivized by profit, by the profit motive, by the drive for money, you constantly are seeing these large corporations eat up, they're just gobbling up hospital after hospital, nursing home after nursing home, agency after agency that shuffles these nurses out to these places that they're not prepared to give care to, right? It's interesting because I think even conservatives think that your average normie conservative, not politicians, your average normie conservative voter understands that there is a deep, deep sickness in healthcare. And who's taking the brunt of that? First and foremost, it's the patients. The patients take the worst part of that. I have seen things that you guys would vomit at. It's disgusting. It's tragic. And that's just my experience. We're overloaded right now, nurses are, with way too many patients, way too much responsibility, and way too low pay. We can't pay our fucking bills. And I'm an RN saying this. I listen to these LPNs making $20 an hour, some of them. What the fuck is that? What is that? Literally in charge of keeping somebody alive. Yeah, I'm not kidding you. $20 an hour for an LPN. Insane. It's disgusting. So to wrap all this up, as I said, patients take the brunt of this. Hospitals and nursing homes and their corporate fucks work in these offices, these air-conditioned, pristine offices where they push their little papers and do their little insurance policies and say, oh, well, we can't approve that because your insurance policy doesn't cover it. Fuck all of them, okay? Fuck them. They're not in the trenches. They don't know what it means to be a fucking nurse. The people who convicted her, I hope they are ashamed. I hope they feel fucking ashamed of themselves. Clearly, they are not nurses. They could never understand what that's like. Not in a million years. I'm fucking proud of my job. I'm fucking proud of what I do and the work that I fucking do and the work that I put into my shit and the people whose lives I have objectively made better. With every mistake I've made along the way, I wouldn't change a fucking thing. Not a goddamn thing, okay? I made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of stupid brain dead mistakes. But you know what? I was putting forth 100% every fucking step of the way, and nobody's going to tell me otherwise. And every single day I live with the fear that 2 years ago, I made a mistake, and they could just call me and say, by the way, you're under arrest now because somebody died due to an error that you made when we audited you. Bullshit. Suck my dick, okay? The system's broken. It's all busted, and all of us are suffering, except our betters. So this is a very personal topic for me. If you couldn't tell, it's very personal, okay? But I think this is good. I think it's good for you guys to see this because it's too much. It's just too much. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want to see more. Hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload. You can join my channel membership at youtube.com/AlecGunther/TTV/join for only 99 cents a month. That's less than the price of a blowjob from your mom. You can be part of the channel membership program and you will get early access content as well as a sweet badge next to your name and exclusive emotes to use in the comments that nobody else gets. Thank you again, and I will see you all in the next video.